I'm Clive Priddle. This is The Current. This is our 1st of May Workers' Day issue. And we are super excited to have with us today Stephanie Land, author of Made, and Sarah Jaffe, author of Necessary Trouble and the forthcoming Work Won't Love You Back. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So since this will go out on May 1st, and it's International Workers' Day traditionally, we wanted to talk about the essentials today, and not the essentials with any quote marks around them, but capital E essentials, those people who, at our current moment in time, have been deemed to be the most important people, but we don't always seem to be treating them as though they're terribly important to us. We're not necessarily paying them all that much. And so I wanted to ask both of you if, from your reporting, from your observations, and from, of course, your experience, what it feels like to be watching the essentials at the moment. How do you think about them, Stephanie? Just bring back memories to you.
I'm not sure if it brought back memories, but it definitely brought up a lot of empathetic feelings. I remember quite vividly what it was like to lose even 3 or 4 hours of work, and look at the possibility of not being able to pay rent because of that. And that was 1 day of work. And when the stay-at-home orders began, I thought of the restaurant workers and the people who are really living in survival mode already, and now they can't afford to pay rent in a couple of weeks, and now this is going to be on May 1st. That'll be the second month that we'll be needing to pay rent, and yeah, I really started thinking about the consequences and how dire circumstances are going to be for millions of people immediately.
Your book is very much about, your struggle to juggle being a young mother and maintain temporary work, often work by the hour that came and went. It was pretty unreliable. If you had been told to stay home at critical moments in your daughter's life, then what would it have done to you?
There were a few times that I was, because I worked in Northwest Washington, and when it snows there, everything just shuts down. And of course, my car couldn't have really gone anywhere anyway, but my boss didn't want me to take the risk of getting stuck in a client's driveway. So the days that I was told to stay home, it was a kind of feeling of dread. And depending on what week of the month it was, I constantly had my budget going through my head anyway, but it was like, okay, it's the 20th, these bills have been paid. So this means this next paycheck is going to be 6 hours short. And then it was just a constant math. Okay, what bill can I not pay in order to pay for rent? Rent always eats first. And then, what's the next thing, and the next and the next. So it was just that sort of math going on. And then I remember one time there were 3 days that I wasn't able to work, and you just kind of hunker down into a feeling of, well, I guess brace yourself for losing everything.
Right. So 2 months would have been like sort of unimaginable, wouldn't it?
Completely unimaginable. Yeah, I can't fathom. I know that I still would have been trying to work, like no matter what, just finding some way, some client who would still allow me to work somehow.
So there's the essential workers for whom work is essential. They've got to get work done because they absolutely need the money to put food on the table and put shelter over their heads. And then there's this other side of the essential worker conversation, which I'm going to turn to you, Sarah. So lots of people go into caring professions. and they too have been deemed essential right now, whether they are healthcare or elder care or any kind of sort of support services for people who are absolutely in need. I'm not sure that any of them thought that they were signing up for what we've asked them to do.
It's really true. I've talked to so many nurses and healthcare workers over the last few weeks, and they kind of keep saying, like, you keep telling us we're heroes, and today we get the announcement that they're going to do like a Blue Angels flyover. I live in Philadelphia. And the nurses I'm talking to are saying, like, we don't need that. I don't need you to tell me I'm a hero. I would just like an N95 mask for every shift even. I mean, you're supposed to have one for every patient that's contagious. But at this point, they're like one per shift they're lucky. We're just seeing in real time sort of the crumbling of our health insurance system, our hospitals, which have no spare capacity and now are suddenly expected to take on, hundreds more patients than they normally would. And then the workers who are living it have been saying that there are things wrong with it for a long time. And now they're just kind of going like, guys, like, we know this now. Maybe this can at least be an opportunity for us to say we need to do it differently now in the future.
Yeah, and I mean, the other place that seems to be really suffering at the moment is those not quite healthcare facilities, so the elder care facilities. There's an enormous concentration of the virus, people who have limited medical training, and catastrophic outbreaks going on there.
Yeah. And one of the things that was really telling about that is, early on in this, I got a call from somebody who works in Washington State in the union for, some of these nursing home workers. And they were pointing out that, like, this is spreading literally because these care homes don't pay them enough to have one job. So they literally go from one to the next in the same day. And that is in many ways, how it could be spread. So, the conditions that we put people in, forcing them to work, like Stephanie was saying, either go to work or, be completely screwed, are also the conditions that like created the spread of this virus.
Stephanie, you're in Montana. You're in Missoula, so you're in a significant town there. But how does it feel there compared to, say, Sarah's in Philadelphia?
Well, our spread has been extremely small and slow. So I think we're not really experiencing a lot of fear that maybe some people are. I mean, I do, but when my husband's like the designated shopper, and when he goes out, he's like, oh yeah, there were people in the store with their kids and walking around. And so I think we're kind of in a bubble here as far as that is concerned. But we also operate on a tourism industry, and I'm kind of worried that as we start to open up the state again, then people will kind of flock here because they can vacation here, and so I don't know. I guess there's a huge unrest in town just because the restaurants are of course closed, and for a town that operates mostly on tourism, this is the time that things are starting to get going, and so I think people are really anxious to get it going.
So do you find yourself sort of caught with conflicting feelings? On the one hand, wanting to see people have their opportunities back at the restaurants, doing their evening jobs and such, and on the other hand,
honestly, no, I think the government needs to be helping them out more. I think we need to be boosting food stamps, and we need to get the payment protection program and get the small businesses supported. And, we need to be taking care of our workers instead of asking them to kind of take care of themselves and do what they need to do. I think what our governor has done is very appropriate. And although I know that people would like to get back to work, they know that they're putting themselves at risk by doing that. My friend's a hairdresser, and people have been really pressuring her to open up her salon, and it's crazy. It baffles my mind. She's pregnant too, and I'm just like, how can you be pressuring this person to cut your hair? So
do you think she's worried that she might lose their business if she doesn't open?
I don't know. I think, nobody really likes people to be upset with you or sending you kind of sassy messages or trying to pressure you into something you don't want to do. I'm sure eventually she would get their business back. But at the same time, that's not being treated in a very respectful way. And so why would you want their business? I mean, they're treating you like you're disposable. And they're treating you like, well, if you get sick, then I can just go somewhere else. So it's kind of an ugly feeling all around.
Sarah, how is Philadelphia? We hear that it's been quite badly affected by cases of coronavirus, and presumably, like New York, where I am, it's a very quiet city these days.
Yeah, it's not as bad as New York, I think, but in terms of, I hear sirens going by outside my window. I'm in West Philadelphia, and there not that much car traffic on my street on a normal day, but it's much, much quieter. It feels strange out there, and I, walk my dog in the neighborhood and wave to everybody over our masks. And you do that little dance when you're walking down the street of trying not to get too close to people, right? We've all figured out these new ways of sort of inhabiting the world. And yeah, it's frustrating because I can relate to the people who really want to open things back up. I am so sick of my home, and I'm a work from home person normally. So this isn't as hard for me as it is for, I'm sure, a lot of people. I don't have kids, but yeah, I also, I'm talking to frontline healthcare workers several times a week. I just got off the phone before we got on this call with somebody who works at a CVS in Ohio who had the virus, who's trying to figure out workman's comp because, everything is a mess now. And they keep saying oh, you can get tested, you can get treated. But in reality, the testing takes days and days to get your information back. Then your boss and the unemployment system and everybody else sort of gives you hell about taking time off because the entire system that we have is set up to make sure that nobody scams it, rather than just to say it's better that people should be fed and taken care of than it is to worry that much about oh my God, some lazy person might be getting one over on us.
So when this is, I won't say over, but when the first experience of coronavirus has been processed by all of us, when we've had a chance to think about it, feels like there are going to be some people who make permanent changes in some of their behaviors. I can imagine some people never going back to full-time office life if they have that option. They might say, I just don't want to be there as much as I used to be, and I'm going to work from home now. Now that I can know that I can leave, I'm happy to be at home. But do you think that the essentials are going to have the freedom to make changes? Can you imagine them being sufficiently appreciated or empowered at the end of this? Are we going to give them the right to say, no, look, if you want to ask us to go to work in the middle of a pandemic, then there has to be a very different kind of social equation at work here?
Yeah, I just finished working on a piece on just this subject, in fact, for May Day. So that'll be at the New Republic. I don't know what title is going to be talking a few days ahead. Yeah, one of the things it's in for healthcare workers are used to being told that they're essential, right? And they're used to being told things like if you go on strike, you're terrible and you don't care about your patients and you don't care about whatever. For grocery store workers, it's a little different to be told that you're essential suddenly, right? It's a little bit different for a woman that I spoke with, Bradley. She's 6-year-old in North Carolina, and she was on strike when we talked, and she was just she's they don't care about us normally. Suddenly we're essential. And they're not giving us, they're telling us, she literally had a customer come in and give her a mask that they had made, which is lovely, right? Isn't that nice? And her boss said, no, you can't wear it. They make the customers scared. She's like, my customer gave me the mask. But, so this moment where you're getting, and there's When I drive around Philadelphia to go to the grocery store or whatever, there are big billboards up now that are like, thank you to our essential workers. And it doesn't just list healthcare workers, right? It also lists grocery store workers. It also lists like the postal service, which, you know, may or may not have been bailed out by the time this video airs. And what that says to people is it's an interesting like form of change in how they're normally seen. And it's shifting how they react to things. So, you know, I spoke with a pharmacy tech in a Kroger grocery store in West Virginia who was saying, you know, that like his coworkers are more militant than they used to be. They're saying like, we demanded hazard pay and we got it. And we've demanded some protections and we got them. And now our contract is up in August. They're members of the United Food and Commercial Workers. And they're like, we need to get that in our permanent contract because Kroger's making out really well right now because suddenly everybody's got a grocery shop and not go to the restaurant. So there is a way that like calling people essential suddenly does change their perspective of how much power and leverage they might have in the workplace.
Does that feel recognizable, Stephanie? Does that feel like something you might see I'm assuming Montana is a little bit more conservative part of the country than Philadelphia, perhaps, but maybe there's less income inequality in Montana. I don't know.
I would say that a lot of the people who live and work locally are paid very, very little. It's a very high number of people in Missoula, especially who make some or half or all of their income off of capital gains. So they own rental properties, or some people even live in Seattle and kind of commute to work and fly back and forth. So it's not necessarily a place to earn a lot of money locally. A $10 an hour job in Missoula is considered a good paying job.
Mm-hmm. And how have the support services stood up? I mean, how is the healthcare system there? Presumably, if you don't have too much in the way of cases right now, everybody's fine. But would it be overwhelmed if a large number of tourists brought COVID to town in a serious way?
Yeah, there are a lot of my friends who works at, she's a writer for BuzzFeed. She's been kind of tracking the Craigslist ads for, you know, come isolate in Montana, to like these little out in the woods cabins where they really don't have a strong healthcare system at all. And so the biggest population of cases that we have right now are in Bozeman, and that's kind of the hub for a lot of the wealthy to fly in and out of. And then here in Missoula, that's also kind of the case. So it's kind of growing in places where people travel in and out of a lot. But we're also, you know, the testing isn't really happening either. So we don't really know. We can just only assume. So I don't know. I would say it's still kind of an unknown out there for a lot of us. But we have been talked about as one of the states that could open and we'd be fine because our caseload is so low. But a lot of that is because there are a lot of places in the state with a very low population and probably, you know, a hospital that is hours and hours away. So anybody who would get sick out in those places would be in danger.
I want to kind of give you an opportunity to talk about best case scenarios when we come out of this. That's basically where I'm going. So there's an argument that says after any great sort of social trauma, reform and progressive politics has a moment, and there's an opportunity to recognize people who previously haven't maybe had recognition before and to give rights to people who haven't had adequate rights before. Is there a scenario coming out of the coronavirus that you envisage whereby we treat the essential working population like they're really essential, like they matter to us, and like we care about that? Can you imagine that?
I would hope that that's a possibility and a reality. I keep thinking about this person on Twitter who kept tweeting about, like, he's a grocery store clerk and he said, everybody's calling me a hero. Don't call me a hero. Pay me $20 an hour. And so I would hope, we don't have to fight as hard for $15 an hour coming out of this. I would hope that we separate a job from the ability to have health insurance, and that, we would see how essential the people who take care of our families are to us. There's a huge population of invisible people in this country who make all other work possible. And suddenly they are visible and deemed essential. But I still wonder if that will stick when people can suddenly go back to the gym and get their nails done. And, we go back to consuming the services that they offer, and leave this population to clean up after us again. So I really hope that we remember the empathy that we feel, and that we remember calling grocery store clerks heroes. And because in my mind, they've always been heroes. I mean, I can't imagine dealing with with the public, just watching some of the customers in front of me and behind me. I think about that every time I go to the grocery store. So I would just hope that we pause and we really look at each other in the eye, and we remember that we're all human beings, no matter what kind of job we have. I would hope that in our inability to shake hands and get into this 6-foot radius of each other, that we start to notice that other person is there, not in a way that is, something that we need to dance around on the sidewalk, like you said, Sarah, but as this is a person who has a life. And I really hope that continues, that we, whether or not we're doing it literally, we still stop and applaud those people who are taking care of us.
Yeah, so we've just had a massive experience in how quickly the world can change, right? Like, we have now shifted our entire working lives, no matter what, right? Unless you're a rich person who is just sitting around, earning money anyway. But if we worked in an office, we're probably working from home, or we've been laid off. And if you still have to go to work right now, you have a whole new set of worries that are happening to you when you are still going out to go to that job. So everybody's experience of work is changing right now. We're also seeing how quickly political change can happen, right? So Congress cut everybody a $1,200 check. Well, I mean, maybe. I haven't gotten mine yet. My roommate has, though. So I do know they exist. And boosted unemployment benefits, and also handed out trillions of dollars to big corporations and banks. But they've also, we've seen things like moving homeless people into vacant hotels and vacant properties. You mean it turns out you can just put people in houses. It turns out you can just give people money so that they can live. It turns out you could, in fact, cancel rent because you've canceled evictions in a lot of cases, right? We're seeing in real time that the things that we've been told for decades, for my entire life, and I just turned 40, that you can't do, it's impossible, you can't possibly do that. We're seeing it happen, right? Andrew Cuomo in New York has basically taken control of all the hospitals in the state of New York. So he can no longer argue that you can't have a publicly run healthcare system, because he's basically running the healthcare system right now. So, over and over and over again, we're seeing that things can change because we don't have a choice right now. So, I think that gives us an amazing amount of space to think when we go back to normal, a lot of the old normal was terrible. And maybe we don't want it to go back to be that way. Maybe we want it to be something else. Maybe the thing that we will learn about not being able to go hug our friends right now is how much more time we want to spend doing that, and how much less time we want to spend chained to a computer. I mean, I like seeing all of your faces on video right now, but also I would much prefer to do this in person. I'm so tired of Zoom calls. And so I think that there is a major opportunity, but it's not going to be given away easily, right? All of these things that are being won right now are being won in sort of big, messy political battles. And we have to keep having those. And we have to sort of find out new ways. My first book was, Necessary Trouble. We have to figure out what the new ways are to continue to have leverage, to continue to apply pressure, to continue to make that trouble while social distancing and not spreading this stinking, awful, miserable virus around.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you, both of you, for our International Workers' Day edition, where I've got to tell you that Hachette Book Group has announced that they're giving us the day off. So,
well, there you go.
The corporation has discovered it can do that too.
See, it's wonderful. More holidays.
Whatever will you do?
Yeah. But it was really great of both of you to join us. Thank you so much. Yeah. It's a pleasure meeting you, Stephanie. Sarah, it's always a joy.
Yes.
You too.
And as you say, next time in person, let's hope.
Yes, please.
Hachette,